Being There is a 1979 movie directed by Hal Ashby that was based on the 1971 book, also called Being There, by Jerzy Kosinski. I remember growing up, my parents had a VHS copy of Being There, and I would see the cover art all the time on our movie shelf. I was intrigued by this image of this proper-looking gentleman man in an old-timey suit walking on air above this frozen lake with this big mansion in the background. Well, he doesn't actually walk on air and float, but maybe he does in a metaphorical, figurative sense. Keep watching and find out. See what I did there? Part of the reason I wanted to make this book versus movie video for Being There is that I don't see that many people talking about this film. I mean, it's a popular film, people know about it, but it doesn't get talked about in online discourse as much as I think it should. So this video is intended not only to be an entry into my book versus movie series, but also as a couch bums apostrophe S's kino, couch bums kino, a recommendation. If you haven't seen this, I recommend you go check it out. So enough of me blabbing. Let's get into this. So what is Being There about? It's about Chance. The man, Chance. That's his name. He's a middle-aged gardener, and he's been gardening his whole life, and he really likes working in the garden. He also really likes watching TV, and that's about all there is to him. He's a pretty simple guy, and I mean simple in both the personality sense and the mental sense.
Mr. Chance, I'm very pleased to meet you.
Yes.
Chance can't read or write. He's illiterate. They never go into too much detail about exactly what's off about him, but the book clearly states him to have some kind of mental deficiency, which I'm guessing is like clinically low IQ or something. As I'm saying this, actually, Chance kind of reminds me of an earlier version of Forrest Gump. But to be fair, Forrest Gump could do more, say more, and generally had more going on than Chance did.
Yes.
Chance also kind of reminds me of the artist Andy Warhol and the enigmatic, mercurial personality he would put on whenever he was out in public or doing interviews. He'd be asked questions about the meaning of his work, and his responses would be like,
Andy, do you feel that the public has insulted your art?
No.
Why not?
Well, I hadn't thought about it.
It doesn't bother you at all then?
No.
And art critics would debate endlessly about what he really meant. Whether or not he was fooling everyone to this day, no one really knows. Chance has worked as a gardener in the same mansion his whole life. The only things he knows about the outside world is all that he's seen on TV. He bases all his interpersonal reactions based on whatever he's seen broadcasted. One day, the old man who owns the mansion dies, and his estate lawyers come by and tell Chance that since he isn't related to the deceased, he must leave.
Are you related to the deceased, Mr. Chance?
I don't think so.
So he leaves, and out he walks into this modern world that he knows absolutely nothing about. Throughout the story, there's a bunch of wealthy, famous, well-read, Ivy League, politically connected people, including all the way up to the President of the United States, that think Chance is a literal genius who has paradigm-shifting views on economics and politics. It would be inaccurate to say that Chance has duped them all, because that would imply he meant to deceive them. And he didn't. He's just calm and well-dressed, and when he smiles and nods, people see whatever answer they're looking for in his calm disposition.
That's one of the things I admire about you, your admirable balance. You seem to be a truly peaceful man.
Thank you, Ben.
At the end of the story, Chance, this blank slate of a man with probably 5 brain cells in his head, is next in line to become chairman of the Fed or some other very high up politically and economically connected position. They never really say what it is, but he has gone from a absolute nobody to the upper echelons of society within the course of a week.
If we want to hold on to the presidency, our one and only chance is Chauncey Gardner.
In a thematic sense, Being There is a satire. It's a social satire that pokes fun at society, particularly the elites, the wealthy, the educated, people in charge, people in the media, people in political power. But I also think the satire goes beyond that and could apply to just society in general. This story has a lot to say about how easily people are fooled and how gullible they can really be. It also says a lot about human nature and psychology, for example, like how people are going to hear what they want to hear, and when they look at something, they'll see what their mind has already projected onto it. I say all this because the main character, Chance, is a literal blank slate. Chance has this zen-like tranquility and serenity that he gives off. Whether or not he means to, it's really hard to tell. And this is, of course, the core of all of the story's comedy. Chance's responses, by and large, are limited to one-word answers, very short, simple sentences, smiles, and nods.
Yes.
When I say this movie is a comedy, it is one of the most uniquely funny movies that I've ever seen. It's not like some big, crazy, laugh-out-loud comedy with all these setups and payoffs, or it doesn't have any gross-out joke moments, but instead it's one of the most comfiest and gentlest comedies that I've ever seen. Anytime Chance is interacting with another character, we as the audience know that they are having two completely different conversations. One of the most famous scenes in the movie is when Chance is having the sit-down meeting with Mr. Rand and the US president. They think he's this well-off businessman named Chauncey Gardner, and they ask him for his perspective on complicated economic matters. They'll say something like, stimulate growth in the economy. And when he hears stimulate growth, he thinks that they're talking about stimulating growth in a garden, like with plants.
Mr. Garner, do you agree with Ben, or do you think we can stimulate growth through temporary incentives?
As long as the roots are not severed, all is well, and all will be well in the garden. First comes spring and summer, but then we have fall and winter, and then we get spring and summer again.
Mr. Rand and the US president think he's answering their questions about these complicated issues in a very poetic way, and they think he's a genius for it.
I think what our insightful young friend is saying is that we welcome the inevitable seasons of nature, but we're upset by the seasons of our economy.
Yes.
That is one of the most refreshing and optimistic statements I've heard in a very, very long time.
Another example of this type of situation comes later in the movie when a reporter asks Chance if he's read the editorials about his economic comments.
What was your reaction to the Post's editorial on the president's speech?
I did not read that.
The New York Times spoke of your peculiar brand of optimism. What was your reaction to that?
I do not know what it means.
But it would be of great interest to me to know just what newspapers you do read.
I do not read papers. I watch TV.
The reporters see some respectable, educated man stating his preferred method of news consumption.
Do you mean, Mr. Gardner, that you find television's coverage of the news superior to that of the newspapers?
I like to watch TV.
But he literally means, I cannot read, and I just watch TV.
Few men in public life have the courage not to read the newspapers. None that this reporter has met have the guts to admit it.
There's so many moments throughout the movie where we as the audience know that Chance's mind is on another planet. He's not even in the same room with these people. Another example of this is when old man Rand is dying and he asks Chance to take care of Eve for him, and he calls her a delicate flower.
Watch over her. She's a delicate flower.
Once he says that, you could see something clicks in Chance's head and goes, a flower? Yes, I can take care of flowers.
A flower. Yes, Ben.
What really, really makes this movie is Peter Sellers' incredible performance. In my mind, Peter Sellers is either Dr. Strangelove or Chance the Gardener. And lately, I've been leaning more towards Chance the Gardener. I think this is my favorite performance that I've seen of Peter Sellers. Peter Sellers does an amazing job with the acting and the physical comedy in general, and really just adds such a gentle, blissful ignorance that you can see all the little nuances of this character that you don't really get from the book. A good example of a physical comedy moment that wasn't in the book at all is right here when Chance has no idea what he's holding or what to do with it, and you can see him trying to suck the fire through the cigar. Another one of these types of moments that wasn't in the book was when Chance tries to quiet this person in real life with the TV remote. I think this one is important as well because it shows that his reality is blurred and he isn't fully aware if his interactions are all part of a big show or something. Chance doesn't know if he's on some TV show or it's real life, or if there is even a difference between the two of them in his mind. Overall impression, which is better, the book or the movie? The book is relatively short, it's written in a simple style, it's easy to understand, it goes fast, it lends itself well to rereads. I definitely think I will go through it again at some point and pick up on more of the subtleties that I missed. The Being There movie is all of those positive things I just said, plus you also get one of the best performances of Peter Sellers' career. His performance makes the movie. He's the reason I'm saying the movie is my preferred version of this story. Without the right person playing Chance, the movie falls flat. It just doesn't work. Peter Sellers fit so well into this role and did such a natural looking job that I couldn't imagine Chance being played by anybody else.
Yes.
Let's get into some of the more general book versus movie differences for Being There. So an interesting difference location-wise is that the book takes place in New York City, and the movie takes place in and around the Washington, D.C. area. This doesn't really have much of an impact on the storytelling, though, just a, setting change. Although the change of setting does cause this little difference later on in the story when Chance and Eve go to the fancy dinner party. In the book, since it's New York City, that scene takes place at the UN, but in the movie, this is more of a nondescript location where they meet the important people. Even though it's not the UN, it is still the DC area, so it makes sense that there'd be a gathering of ambassadors and politicians. In both versions of the story, there's this maid character named Louise, who also worked for the old man just like Chance did. She has a slightly larger part in the movie than in the book, because in the book, when the old man dies and the estate lawyers come over, they inform Chance that Louise went back home to Jamaica, and unfortunately she died, so at that point she's out of the story. Whereas in the movie, she doesn't die, and has some lines later on when she sees Chance on TV.
And I'll say right now, he never learned to read and write. Had no brains at all. Was stuffed with rice pudding between the ears. Shortchanged by the Lord and dumb as a jackass.
Another difference in a thematic sense is that the movie brings up some social and racial issues that weren't really mentioned in the book.
It's for sure a white man's world in America. All you gotta be is white in America to get whatever you want.
I do feel like nowadays I could see Chance's story playing out the same if he was a black guy or someone else not Peter Sellers, assuming he had the same appearance and characteristic and personality traits and that zen-like tranquility that had a very calming effect on everyone around him. But then again, to be fair, this movie is 50 years old at this point, and the book is even older, and this character, Louise, is just venting her own personal frustrations here. While the racial commentary stuff does add another dimension to the story, they honestly don't do too much with it. And there's another scene where we see some graffiti in the background about racial issues. There's another thing about it here or there, but they really don't go much farther than these few instances. Towards the beginning of the movie, the car accident scene happens in both versions of the story, both the book and the movie. But in the book, it happens a little sooner after Chance leaves his home than in the movie. The movie adds a couple scenes between the time Chance leaves the mansion and then gets hit by the car. The damage Chance takes from this car accident was also greater in the book than it was in the movie. In the book, Chance actually passes out from the pain and wakes up in the Rand mansion, where in the movie, it's more of just like a bad bump on his leg. The line where Chance tells the US president that he looked much smaller on TV is in both the book and the movie. However, in the book, Chance said that line to Old Man Rand after the president left the room. In the movie, he tells that right to the president's face while he's still in the room with him.
On television, Mr. President, you look much smaller.
And I think that works better. I think that makes it funnier. The book also features a Russian politician character who wasn't in the movie at all. The Russian politician, like the US president, also quotes Chance, aka Chauncey Gardner, in a speech he made.
Chauncey Gardner, Mr. Rand's close friend and advisor, was at the meeting this morning. I found Mr. Gardner to have a feeling for this country that we need more of.
And then his people go mad trying to find any information about this mysterious Chauncey Gardner.
What do you mean he's got no background? I quoted the man on national television. He's a very well-known man.
The book actually has a handful of extra scenes where the USSR is trying to find any information they can about Chauncey Gardner.
This man carries no identification, no driver's license, no wallet, no credit cards.
The movie does have people in the US government searching for him, and they don't specifically mention the USSR, but they do mention there are 16 different countries trying to look up information on Chauncey Gardner.
Gardner is not a foreign agent. There are now 16 countries investigating the man.
So I imagine that would also include Russia. One thing I think is interesting with Being There, and this could apply to adaptations in general, is the differences that arise because of the medium which the story is told. In the movie, we never actually get to hear Chance's thoughts. We don't get a voiceover, we don't get his inner monologues, whatever those internal thoughts might be. However, in the book, there are certain lines that let us know exactly what he's thinking. For example, when Eve mistakes his name Chance for Chauncey Gardner.
May I ask your name?
Chauncey Gardner.
Chauncey Gardner? Mr. Chauncey Gardner.
We know in the book that Chance was fully aware that she got his name wrong and just chose not to correct her. In the book, we also get a number of lines that let us know just how strong of a hold television had on Chance's mind. In the book, we get lines of Chance's inner thoughts letting us know that he would like to become one of the images he sees on TV, or how he has a feeling that he would like to dwell within the TV set. These lines also kind of remind me of Andy Warhol in a way.
Yes.
The original Being There book actually isn't that long. It's only like 150 pages or so. So if you just filmed everything that was in the book, it probably wouldn't add up to the length of a feature film. So understandably, there was some stuff that the movie added. For example, this scene where Chance interacts with the inner city kids was totally made up for the movie, and that interaction is referenced later and continues in this scene, which is also not in the book. Chance's interaction with the police here was made up for the movie.
That tree is very sick. It needs care.
Yes, sir. I'll report it right away.
The movie also has a handful of scenes where Chance is riding the elevator and having awkward conversations with this guy that weren't in the book, but I'm glad they added them.
I've never been in one of these before.
It's one of Mr. Rand's.
How long do we stay in here?
We'll see what the doctor says.
I think my favorite little comedic scene that is only in the movie is this one here where the butler guy asks Chance if he wants a car.
Would you like a car, sir?
Yes, I would like a car.
Thinking he has somewhere to go. Chance says yes, and then when the car arrives, he just leaves.
Are you going somewhere? No.
The movie also features a number of close-ups of TV programs and broadcast static, which are meant to emphasize the themes of media and its influence on Chance and society as a whole. The movie's iconic ending where Chance is walking on water was also not in the book. Obviously, the shot wasn't in the book because there's no visuals, but this scene where Chance is walking on water was different from the book's ending, which just had Chance in a peaceful state doing what he loves, gardening. As always, I like to finish off with some random thoughts I had while watching this movie. I always think it's interesting when a movie adaptation becomes more well-known than the original book, and then to try and help sell the book later on in reprints, they put the main actor's face from the movie right on the front center of the book's cover. I've seen a few versions of the I Am Legend book cover that prominently feature Will Smith on right on the cover. The giant mansion that Mr. Rand owns and where most of the movie's story takes place is actually a very famous mansion, and it is in fact the same big famous mansion that was used in the 2001 Hannibal movie as Mason Verger's estate. I think the only joke in the movie that I didn't really get was this line here about the bed facing north.
I like to sleep with my head facing the north. I sleep better that way.
Yes, I've heard about that. But this is facing west.
What is facing west?
The bed.
Was there something I'm not getting, or was the joke just that Chance is ignorant and confused? There are some times when I think Old Man Rand could just be giving the most kind, charitable interpretations of everything Chauncey Gardiner says because he's old and senile.
You mean your business was shut down?
Shut down and closed by the attorneys.
The businessman today is at the mercy of kid lawyers from the SEC.
And if in the movie you think some of the people seem kind of stupid for believing Chance, in the book they come across as even more stupid to me. But that is part of the overall theme of the thing. It's not that they're stupid, it's a comment on human nature and human psychology. They vent all their thoughts and views and problems and concerns onto him, and he just goes, yes. And they're like, oh, I'm so glad to be heard. Thank you. It really means something that you listen. A cool little Easter egg detail here is that this guy in this scene is Hal Ashby, the movie's director. I really like how throughout the movie there were a handful of people who were just not under Chance's spell. His weird charm didn't work on them.
Is that Gardner?
Fresh young saplings.
Chauncey Gardner.
No, he's a real gardener.
He does talk like one, but I think he's brilliant.
I think that really helps ground the movie and makes him not so much of this Zen-like cartoon character. This guy at the political event here in the movie kind of looks like a knockoff young Mark Knopfler. In the movie, there are a couple, and I mean like one or two at most, actual genuine thoughts and feelings that Chance expresses.
You look much better today, Ben.
The most notable one for me is right here when he tells old Mr. Rand,
I'm sorry you're so sick, Ben.
That's not just one of his vague statements about gardening, that's an actual thought that came from his head and out his mouth, and also shows that he is actually a nice person. I saved this random thought for last because this is my favorite one and it actually kind of blew my mind when I read it. One of the most interesting things I learned that explains the movie's portrayal of Chance as this Zen-like figure is that the author, Jerzy Kosinski, modeled the character of Chance after Jerry Jarvis, a former greenhouse manager who became a national leader of the Transcendental Meditation movement during the 60s and 70s. Kosinski met Jarvis at a meditation center in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and the meditation temple where they met was at the corners of, wait for it, Chauncey and Gardner Street in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I love that. That's amazing. If you've made it to this point in the video, thank you very much. I appreciate it as always. And if you've never read Being There or seen the movie, I totally recommend you go check it out. Until next time, goodbye.